Welcome to another episode of PNE Pod, the official podcast of the one and only Preston North End Football Club. Don't forget to hit subscribe or follow wherever you listen to podcasts to make sure you never miss when a new episode is released. My name's Niall McCorn.
And I'm Neil Mellor. We'll be talking to some North End legends, some current first team players, some famous fans of North End, and also some former teammates of mine.
And today we're talking to someone who has got a decorated career in the game, both as a player and as a coach, and actually finished his playing days at North End Mells and transitioned into a coach whilst at Deepdale. And he says he's got a lot to thank Preston for when it comes to that.
Yeah, interesting, because he was talking about how his career ended at North End. He's played in an FA Cup final. He's played with Gazza, Keegan, some absolute legends of the game. But the fact that North End had such an impact on him, he finished there and has lived here ever since.
And he's gone on to coach pretty much everywhere, to be fair, including in places like Sweden, which was interesting to hear him talk about.
Got a few stories about that in India as well. I mean, if you look at the clubs he's coached, there must be near 20 clubs he's been at, but had a real good experience and influence on so many players.
Okay, well, let's get right into it. Here's our chat with former Preston player and coach Neil McDonald. So our latest guest on PNE Pod spent 15 years as a professional, finished his playing days at North End, became a part of the coaching staff at Deepdale and has remained in the area for the last 25 years. Welcome to the podcast to Neil McDonald.
It's great to be here. Thank you very much for the invite.
No problem.
Look forward to sharing a few stories if anybody's interested.
I've heard you've got a few, to be fair.
Yeah, well, the years I've been in football and the years that I've been involved with people, you pick up little stories and sometimes just people want to hear name dropping to a certain extent in the stories, or I find them quite funny anyway and quite interesting.
We will talk Preston, but that's not a Preston accent, is it?
No, it's a Newcastle accent. Quite refined now, I think, with living away from home for quite a long time. Even my wife says, you've been on the phone to your brother, haven't you? How do you know that? Because your accent starts coming out again, you know. So I think whenever I talk to people, even living in Preston for the last 25 years, they all know that I'm from the northeast.
Was it Newcastle growing up, or was the team you supported?
No, believe it or not, the first game that me dad took me to was Newcastle United versus Leeds United. Malcolm McDonald's, John Tudors, Terry Hibbett's, Jinky Smith and stuff like that. But I supported Leeds because of that day. Even though Newcastle beat Leeds 2-0, Leeds were in all white. They had the little tie-ups which hang out with the numbers. And it really hit me that I really like Billy Bremner. Billy Bremner was like the midfield player maestro in the middle, and I thought, right, he's my hero from now on, and that's why I supported Leeds. I used to have loads of fights and battles at school about, Leeds are better than Newcastle.
That's what Leeds did on the pitch.
Yeah. So
because everyone up there is a Newcastle fan, aren't they?
Without a shadow of a doubt, it's Newcastle versus Sunderland. That's the rivalry. But majority of people are Newcastle supporters because it's a one city club, isn't it? And it's just shown now that when the fans get behind the team and off the pitch, as in, you know, the board of directors, the financial backers, if they get that right, then oh my goodness me, so they could even have the biggest stadium in the whole of the country and fill it, no problem at all.
So how old would you have been at this point when you went to St James's?
I signed for Carlisle as a schoolboy. All the clubs were chasing me at the time. I played for the England youth, England schoolboys and youth, and under 21 international. But when I came to 16, leaving school, it was funny. We were having a training session at Carlisle, and Bob Stokoe had just been appointed manager, and Bobby Moncur was the manager when I signed as a schoolboy, and I really liked him, and I thought, right, I want to play for him. We're doing a training session on the training field, which is just behind the goal, and Bob Stokoe come across with a golf club in his hand and a few balls, and he wanted to hit a few over the field, and he made us move further over, and I was like saying, you can't make us move further over. We're training here, like, you know. And then when I went home, I said to my dad, I'm not signing for him. If he's not going to let me train properly, I don't want to sign for him. And then obviously I signed for Newcastle at a tribe. I actually went to a tribunal, and Newcastle had to pay money for me as well. So that was the start from Newcastle. So straight from school, straight into Newcastle.
Football's very different these days, isn't it, for the kids to get taken to academies at 5, 6, sign officially at 9 years old. So for you to get into football, it was okay. How were you playing? Local? Were you playing county? What were you doing?
I think you've heard of Wallsend Boys Club. I used to play for Wallsend Boys Club, who was one of the most famous boys clubs and really still are at the time. They produced player after player. they had 2 coaches at every level. So from I think it was 11s to 16s, they had 2 coaches, and them two coaches was a scout for a different club. So Gillingham, Cambridge, Burnley was the biggest one, Ipswich. So that was why everybody left Newcastle to go on trial all over the country, West Brom, wherever you wanted to go, Carlisle. And yet not many, when you think about it, not many of the young kids signed for Newcastle because they didn't have that reputation of playing the young kids. So everyone used to go dotted over. You could mention...
It's a good point. You think of Shearer, I think, went to Southampton. Carrick went to West Ham. Yeah,
well then you've got Steve Bruce who signed for Gillingham and stuff like that. So you can go back, Eric Steele, who was the first one, Tony Seeley, who used to play for Queen's Park Rangers. They were the first ones. They used to come back to the boys' club and present me with trophies, after the season. So it was really started from there. Used to play for the school, used to play for the county, used to play for the schoolboys, as I said. So it was ongoing all the time. But certainly the Wallsend Boys Club was a really professional outfit when you think about just turning up and playing. They used to do circuits, they used to do proper training. So that was the first ever time I sort of like, I quite like this. And that was what I wanted to do right from the start.
So you go to St James's as a youngster, you see Newcastle play Leeds, and Bremner stands out to you as this midfield player. So why did you become a goalkeeper, or did you sign as a midfielder and then as a right back? Sorry, why did you?
No, I was actually a out and out centre midfield player. I think never even thought about playing any other position apart from centre midfield player. So my strengths were passing, reading the game because I wasn't quick. So put them 2 together, and you've got half a chance. I think as years developed, then sometimes. How I became a right back is our right back got injured. The manager asked me to play there, and I says, yeah, go on, then I'll play there for you. Did really, really well, and then obviously everyone started talking about, my goodness me, this could be his best position, even though I thought centre midfield was my best position. But it come from a different angle. You had the ball, you could see the whole pitch. You keep it simple. I could use my passing ability to pass wherever I wanted to, whereas in midfield, it's a little bit tight. You side on, or you've got to turn, you've got to have a good touch and stuff like that. So that was the mixture between there. Ended up playing centre half, ended up playing left back, could play anywhere really, to be fair. I actually played for Newcastle. We went on tour to New Zealand, played the New Zealand national team 4 times, and I played centre forward and scored the winner. So I've actually played centre forward.
I was going to say, were you a goal scoring midfielder or not? Did you get
I used to score, but I always had more pleasure out of making goals for people, and that as I got older and more mature, that gave me more pleasure making goals for everybody and what I did for myself. But I still scored a few goals myself, not as many as you.
I could have done with you in midfield. Yeah.
You ended up playing over 200 games for Newcastle, which back then was probably more of a common thing than it is now, but that must still fill you with quite a lot of pride.
Well, I'd played over 200 games before I was 22, because I got transferred to Everton when I was 22. So I played 6 seasons, so if you divide that by 6 and stuff like that, I was a regular right from the start. And when I first came in, my first season was when Kevin Keegan came in, so 13,000 coming to watch the game. Kevin Keegan coming to 26,000 and 10,000 locked out. It was unbelievable. So he was the superstar at the time. He was the absolute superstar. So that's how I started. Then you get the knock-on effect on people who come. Mick Shannon comes, Terry McDermott comes, David McCreary comes. In the team was Chris Waddle, Peter Beardsley ended up being in the team, and Paul Gascoigne ended up being in the team as well, all because of Kevin Keegan. We got promoted with Kevin Keegan. We're in the Division 1 at the time. So, and then even when he left in a helicopter. We played Liverpool in a testimonial game, and he left in a helicopter, and I'm like almost crying, going, "Come back, Kevin, come back." So I've got all of them experiences as well. It's absolutely brilliant. But he was the top superstar at the time when he come to Newcastle, and what a difference he made.
He came from Southampton, didn't he?
Yeah, he had obviously been to Hamburg, come to Southampton, and then obviously came to Newcastle. But the Newcastle Breweries were the sponsors of the football club. They obviously took him under the wing, and to be fair, I was on 125 quid at the time. He must have been earning like unbelievable money from the Newcastle Breweries who sponsored him. We went to the Far East to play a tournament, and I think we had 7 games. This was the end of the season, and Kevin says, "Listen, we'll train one day before a game, and every game that we win, we want more spending money." And I went, right, okay, because they didn't really want to argue against him. We won 7, drew 2. Had the best time in the history of the universe, come back with about 350 quid. So that was my experience, and we ended up winning my first trophy. Even though it's on pre-season, it was called the Currain Cup. which I think they still play for now.
Probably the last trophy Newcastle won, I suppose.
We played Botafogo, Yokohama and stuff like that. I actually played against Nunes, and he's the first player I've ever seen who had a photograph of himself on a T-shirt walking around with Nunes on. I'm thinking, oh, there's Nunes. Unbelievable.
I mean, when you look at the names that you've just reeled off, Gazza, Kevin Keegan, Terry McDermott, Chris Waddle, Peter Beardsley, these are like legends of the game. Not just legends of Newcastle, most of them, but legends of English football.
Yeah, at the time they're just a teammate, aren't they? You're trying to learn off everybody you possibly can and trying to influence them by what you can do as well, you know. So, but certainly playing with them, they were far better than me, without a shadow of a doubt. Skill-wise, personality-wise, I was always the one that didn't really want the limelight. I just want to do my job and get away, which I think I'm like as a coach now at the moment.
I think you need that though in a team, though, don't you?
Yeah,
you can't have everyone wanting to be the centre of attention. You
certainly do. So, for an example of David McCreary matching up with Paul Gascoigne, David McCreary just won the ball back and gave it to Paul Gascoigne. Paul Gascoigne didn't have to win the ball back because David McCreary won the ball back. So it's just getting partnerships all the way through. Kevin Keegan, obviously, just give him the ball. Whenever Kevin Keegan asks for the ball, you give him the ball, and the rest of the players are saying, I was available there, yeah, but I've got to give it to Kevin Keegan because I'm a young kid. And as you develop as a young kid, as you develop becoming more mature because you're playing more games, then Kevin Keegan asks for the ball and you don't give it to Kevin Keegan, you pass it to somebody else who's in a better position, and Kevin says, I was available there, Neil, and you say, well, somebody else was in a better position. So that was my learning curve. That's how I learned. And as I think back as a coach, that's what you're trying to teach the kids, to try and have the answers themselves, even though you've got to try and give them that answer as a coach and a manager.
Who helped you out of some of those senior players, the likes of Keegan, the likes of Terry Mack? Ferrari was there as well.
Yeah, Imrie. I still keep in touch with Imrie, and that was every time I say Imrie, that was my debut. I played against Barnsley at home. I'd made 3 youth team games and 2 reserve team games, and we played Manchester United on a Thursday night at Old Trafford, and we're winning 3-2, and I got took off. And I had a really strong opinion then, even though I was only 16, saying, why you took me off? We're winning 3-2, and I was playing really well. And Willie McFall was a reserve team manager at the time, and he said, I've took you off because there's a reason, and he didn't tell me the reason. Came in the next day, Arthur Cox says, right, you're training with the first team. All right, okay. And then they used to do shadow play all the time, and it still hadn't hit home that I was playing. I was playing in the shadow team, and I was playing right midfield for the team. And as I've come in, the rest of the boys are saying, bloody hell, you're playing next tomorrow. Arthur Cox says, are you okay with that? Yeah, as long as you get me 26 tickets. I need around about 26 tickets if you possibly can. So, but going back to that one, the only thing I remember about the game was I got into the box and Imre Verratti took a shot and he could have squared it to me when I had a tap in, and that's all I say to him. Probably 40 years later, whenever I speak to Imre Verratti, why didn't you square that ball to me? He must be thinking, what is he talking about?
Did you say it on the day? Did you say it to him?
Yeah, I did, yeah. Because when you're a young kid, obviously you respect everybody, don't you? And you're listening to everybody, but you still have to have an opinion. Now, I'm exactly the same as them, whether it's Kevin Keegan or whether it's Neil McDonald, a 16-year-old kid, or Kevin Keegan, who was the superstar. I was exactly the same as him because I crossed the line, and that's how I seen the game. So if I said something to you just because I'm a young kid, then I'm saying it for the right reason, vice versa. That's why you're telling me.
Neil Mellor scored. Preston take the lead, and that's exactly what it means to Neil Mellor to score in the West Lancashire derby.